Today's headlines. The Royal Society says the world's too full, implies we must kill more people. Mervyn King offers no solutions to the financial crisis in the Today programme lecture. And we look into the BBC lab. Hello, it's Thursday the 3rd of May. I'm Malcolm Massey and welcome to the UK Column News. We begin this week with the Royal Society's new campaign to knock off billions of people by relaunching the tired old Club of Rome IPCC World Wildlife Fund message of the world is too full and we are running out of resources and humanity consumes too much. The Royal Society campaign has begun with a report entitled People and the Planet. The report came about as a result of a 21-month-long study by 22 so-called experts from such great institutions as the Institute of Science, Ethics and Innovation, the Oxford Institute of Population, Ageing and the African Institute for Development Policy. It lays out 9 main areas of concern, which include human population and consumption are having a worrying impact on the Earth, the planet's resources are finite, the richest parts of the world are consuming much too much, above the level that it can be sustained for everyone in a population of 7 billion or more. The first step to a solution is to reduce this unsustainable consumption in both developed and developing economies. Global population needs to be slowed and stabilised without coercion. Economic activity and happiness have to be decoupled from material and environmental throughputs. Since government policy is to turn Western nations into post-industrial consumer societies, it seems there is some kind of warped irony at work if we are then told we consume too much. A new documentary has been released to niche cinemas in parallel with the Royal Society report, entitled Surviving Progress. It is based on Ronald Wright's 2004 book called A Short History of Progress. It postulates the utter nonsense that we're now reaching a point at which technological progress threatens the very existence of humanity. Both the Royal Society report and Surviving Progress are really arguing that consumption should be levelled across the world. The UK column has been reporting on this particular agenda item for many years, both in print and at talks. This is the policy that everyone on the planet gets an equal chance to pursue a miserable death. And it is a policy which has appeared from many sources, including the United Nations and the Club of Rome. The issue of what is an optimum population level on the planet is a complex one, but the idea that we consume too much, and particularly that we are running out of resources, is an irrational one, for it assumes that humanity is incapable of applying the human mind to the problem in a positive, constructive way, and particularly in the positive, constructive use of technology. The agenda of the population control lobby is, and always has been, destruction. Destruction of anything and everything made by man, and even the destruction of man himself, or at least certain groups. They increasingly use technology themselves in a negative, destructive way to achieve that goal. In the process, they demonise technology in the minds of the populations they are disseminating through their policies, robbing us of the very solutions to the real, day-to-day, physical, economic problems we face. Bank of England Governor Mervyn King gave his assessment of the financial situation and called for what he called bank reform at the BBC's 2012 Today programme lecture last night. He spoke to an invited audience of 300 people. King began his speech with a history of the current financial crisis. He put some historical context on it by making some comparison to the 1930s. He rather ironically included an audio quote from Franklin Roosevelt, before explaining how we would not be recommending any of the actions which helped the United States get itself off the last great financial crash, namely Glass-Steagall, and a massive national infrastructure building programme. King instead promoted his 3 R's: regulation, resolution and restructure. King attempted to sidestep any responsibility for the current financial crisis, complaining that the bank had no powers to regulate the banking system since its full independence and the establishment of the Financial Services Authority. He noted that that situation is about to change, with the Bank of England once again gaining responsibility for banking regulation. Once that happens, he said, the Bank of England will never again allow a similar situation to arise, instead stepping in to take away the punch bowl just as the party is getting going. He said that from time to time, a bank would inevitably fail and that a resolution mechanism is needed. That resolution mechanism would take the form of a legal framework which would ensure that a failing bank can continue to trade while insolvent. In fact, trading while insolvent is exactly what banks are doing today, but King is calling for it to be legalised. Finally, King reiterated his support for the bank restructuring proposals of the so-called Independent Commission on Banking, namely the ring-fencing of high street banking operations from investment banking operations. It has to be reiterated, this ring-fence proposal is not Glass-Steagall. It is a parody of Glass-Steagall which assumes that bankers will never break the rules for a quick profit, and that insider dealing never happens. But we saved the best for last. King said, "A good place to start is to ask, as the Queen famously did, why did no one see this coming? The answer is extremely simple. No one believed it could happen. As usual, the question has to be asked, who is this no one that is constantly referred to by mainstream bankers, economists, journalists and politicians? Many people warned over many years of this banking collapse and continue to do so, including the UK column. Here is yet another warning. This banking collapse has not yet reached its peak. The actions by bankers and politicians to fix the problem has so far done nothing but make it worse. Until the entire system is recognised to be bankrupt and the unrepayable debt restructured, and until there is full Glass-Steagall style separation of the banks, there is no possibility of saving the current system, and the result will worsen for all of us when it finally does go." 2 days before Mervyn King gave his assessment of the financial crisis, Standard & Poor gave theirs by downgrading the credit ratings of 11 Spanish banks, including Santander. The downgrade of Spanish banks came a matter of days following the downgrading of Spanish sovereign debt last Thursday. S&P explained that they downgraded the banks as a direct result of the downgrade of the sovereign debt because of the quantity of sovereign debt held by the banks. But, of course, a large proportion of the sovereign debt on the bank's books is there as a result of Spain having to raise money to bail out the banks, which should go some way to giving a picture of the circular nature of the bankruptcy of the entire financial system. In recognition of this, proposals for a Spanish bad bank are firmly on the table in financial circles. The aim is to take as much of the bankrupt debt as possible and take it off the books of the banks and hold it somewhere safe, where it can be dealt with by the next several generations of Spanish taxpayers. And so the greatest Ponzi scheme ever to exist will be propped up for a little while longer. Staying in Spain, it seems that it joins other nations, including Britain, in selling off its vital infrastructure in order to pay the banks. Spanish Vice President Santa Maria said on Monday that the Spanish government would be announcing the liberalisation of certain services in order to make them more efficient and, more importantly, more austere and economical for citizens. Lucky citizens. Liberalisation means privatisation. It is a term which even The Guardian describes as Orwellian. As the financial crash continues, the impact on the real economy globally grows as well. Initially, in order to finance ever cheaper white plastic rubbish to sell to Western consumers, as we transition from having high-value productive economies to low-value consumer economies, production was transferred to China. This was possible as China started to develop its own manufacturing infrastructure on top of its almost slave-like labour costs. Now, as the downward pressure on Chinese goods increases as a result of failing Western disposable incomes, the Chinese are finding that they are having to work longer hours, with over 30% now working over 10 hours a day. Information gathering has become an accepted form of snooping in our modern lives. One insidious form of snooping comes as the BBC Lab microsite, which asks people to voluntarily give insights into their innermost thoughts. The reason organisations can spy on us this way is that over the past 2 decades, the science of habit formation has become a major field of research in neurology and psychology. One study from Duke University estimated that habits, rather than conscious decision-making, shape 45% of the choices we make every day. The Obama campaign even hired a habit specialist as its chief scientist to figure out how to trigger new voting patterns among different constituencies. But inside the Brain and Cognitive Sciences Department of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, scientists have discovered that the brain creates a 3-step loop when forming habits. First, there is a cue. a trigger that tells your brain to go into automatic mode and which habit to use. The routine, which can be physical or mental or emotional. And finally, there is a reward, which helps your brain figure out if this particular loop is worth remembering for the future. Over time, this loop, cue routine reward, becomes more and more automatic. The cue and reward becomes neurologically intertwined until a sense of cravings emerge. Once the loop is established and the habit emerges, the brain stops fully participating in decision making because the old pattern will unfold automatically. An MIT neuroscientist named Anne said, "We've done experiments where we trained rats to run down a maze until it was a habit, and then we extinguished the habit by changing the placement of the reward. Then, one day, we'll put the reward in the old place and put the rat in, and by golly, the old habit will re-emerge right away. Habits never really disappear." Whilst none of us truly knows where our data ends up and who will be monitoring it, we must ask why government and now the BBC seem so intent on gathering very precise information on us. Some of the questions on the BBC Lab website may be viewed as none other than profiling, with such questions as, what would you do if someone burned a flag at a protest? Or, how would you feel if a protester attacked a minister? These questions appear loaded, and may be seen as a subtle means for a government to determine how the public is reacting to certain austerity measures. The UK column has learned of a campaign being launched which encourages people to provide inaccurate information to such databases as these in order to poison the information that these companies are using to pry into the personal lives of the public, which will render the BBC and other companies' databases worthless, compromising their statistical analysis and possibly wasting millions. However, while the UK column does not condone this behaviour, we must be cautious that once an organisation has determined a person's trigger and reward, then those organisations will be able to easily control the habits and behaviours of that person. Nevermore before has the phrase buyer beware been applicable. Education now. The examinations watchdog, Ofqual, finally admitted this week that science exams have been dumbed down. They compared exam papers from 2003 to 2008 and found that although the curriculum had not changed over that period, the introduction of multiple choice questions had made the exams too easy. While it is impressive that Ofqual has finally caught up with something that everyone was already aware of, the question we should be asking ourselves is why have exam standards fallen so far? Government-driven league tables are obviously a causal factor, as the pressure on schools increased almost exponentially over the same period to achieve all A and A-star grades. So it is a little disingenuous to suggest that while exam standards have fallen, it's okay because the curriculum has stayed the same. In fact, schools are so focused on the grades that when exam standards fall, then so do teaching standards. While school league tables are the main cause of falling standards, there is a broader policy at work. It must be obvious that if you have the nation's future interests at heart, you invest in all your future by giving the next generation of potential scientists and engineers the best education possible. Instead, successive governments have done the opposite. Health news now. Genetically modified food is becoming increasingly popular amongst food retailers as the inexpensive Frankenstein ingredients have found their place in a market that is constantly being driven by the rapidly increasing cost of food and its production. Some of the most popular GM foods include corn, soy, cotton, papaya, tomatoes, rapeseed, dairy products, potatoes and peas, with many of them ending up in cheap processed foods. Scientists have been crossing genes from various plants, animals and insects in order to come up with superplants that can resist pests, funguses and drought problems. Much to their dismay, these experimental foods often create super pests, funguses and diseases as they react to the new genetically modified plants, whilst causing problems within the human body which does not know how to process these alien ingredients. Now, biotechnology company Ventria Bioscience has engineered a new rice plant that incorporates actual human genes. This new rice is the only known GMO on the planet to contain human genes and is currently grown in America across 3,200 acres in Kansas. Ventria has been engineering the plant since 2006, using human genes that are used to produce human liver cells in order to use the artificial proteins that the plant then produces as ingredients for pharmaceuticals. This rice has never been approved for human consumption, but Ventria is growing the crop outside despite it being originally constrained to the laboratory. running the risk that the rice could end up contaminating existing crops in the area. This is not a product that everyone would want to consume, said Jane Rissler from the Union of Concerned Scientists to the Washington Post. It is unwise to produce drugs in plants outdoors. Though receiving tens of thousands of comments from the public in opposition to the use of this crop, the USDA approved open cultivation of Ventria's GM rice anyway, going back on the refusal they had made when Ventria made their original application back in 2003. Commenting on Ventria's proposal that their rice would help third world children overcome chronic diarrhoea, Bill Fries, science policy analyst at the Centre for Food Safety, has gone on record saying, "These genetically engineered drugs could exacerbate certain infections or cause dangerous allergic or immune system reactions. People are advised to be vigilant and always read the label to see what's in their food." Support groups such as Holly Demands Justice, Women Against Rape, and protesters against NHS cover-ups and all forms of other injustices gathered outside the London headquarters of the Independent Police Complaints Authority yesterday to inform the public and any listening media that the system ignores or even persecutes those who try to speak out. Organised by long-time campaigner Michael Doherty, the protests initially elicited little interest from the BBC until it was mentioned that ex-Met Police Commander Ali Desai might be in attendance. In the event, BBC London did put in an appearance and broadcast a short report on the 10 o'clock news. They also lined up a response to the protest from Keith Vaz, from the Home Affairs Select Committee, who stated, "We have been looking at reform of the IPCC for some time." And finally, a reminder of the upcoming Financial Terrorism Exposed talks, which will take place in Dublin on the 27th of May, Manchester on the 2nd of June, and London on the 3rd of June. The aim of the talks is to encourage those that are still largely unaware of the dangers that face them and the lies that are being told by the mainstream media and governments to stand up and take interest. So please do encourage as many people along who are still unaware of these issues. Speakers include Ian R. Crane, Brian Gerrish, Alessio Rastani, Thomas Sheridan, William Engdahl, and guest speaker John Perkins, the author of the well-known publication Economic Hitman. We look forward to seeing you there. I'm Malcolm Massey, and this has been the UK Column News. Thank you for watching.